That. Hey there, Hawkeye fans, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. I am Rob Howe, joined by Scott Docterman from The Athletic. We are the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast, recording on Thursday, August the 25th. Sorry about that pause. I was listening to the YouTube delay in my ear as I was.
You want to start over the pod?
No, I don't.
Start over the pod, or just start over the pod? Okay.
No, I'm just, I messed up, and that's, it's a guy like we were talking about before we started recording. This is just a guy who went to college to be a sports writer and is doing video and podcasts and everything else I had no idea would be in existence for me at this point in my life. But at 56, I'm going to power through, and it's going to be this opening is more just confirming that Howe's an idiot, which I got a lot of yesterday on a social media platform, and slept like a baby last night. So we are going to talk about what we heard from Kirk Ferentz yesterday on Wednesday, August the 23rd, our first real information, like legit info since Kids Day, which was on the 12th of August. So and there hasn't been a lot coming out. There aren't photo galleries like there used to be as much. It's just, I don't know. It's closed off and fine. Whatever they want to do, as long as they win football games, that's the bottom line. But I think the two main topics, and we can start whichever one you want. The gambling investigation seems to have some resolution for some of the people, at least. And then the health of the new starting quarterback, Cade McNamara, the transfer from Michigan. Let's start with him, Scott, because he's probably the most important guy on the team, I would say.
Mm-hmm. No question.
Here's my take on it, and I'm sticking with it. He's questionable for the opener. He's trying to get back into practice, and questionable. The designation in the NFL means they're not sure if he's going to play or not, and that's where we are.
That's basically 50-50, and I think that's probably fair at this point. I mean, we're talking about somebody that got injured 12 days ago and has not yet re-entered practice, and he has only 9 days before the first game. So he has missed more time than there is time left before the first game.
And he was out in the spring. He was out last fall.
Right. He only played 3 games last fall and was hurt, had surgeries, wasn't able to do teamwork during the spring. So it's, I think that's a fair designation at this point, is to call him questionable. Now, the NFL term, NFL teams and fans just scoots by. Colleges, because it's never used, it just kind of freaks them out. And I know that there's a desire to see him compete, and it's always sounded like there's some of us that have pushed it out there that he's going to play, and others of us who've been a little more cautious. I don't know. I expect him to play. I think he's going to play, but that doesn't mean he will play, and I'm not going to predict it. I think that'd be dumb, because when you're talking about injuries, bones are one thing, like a knee or something like that, an ankle, people fight through those to an extent. Muscles are different. And if there's a threat of a muscle being re-aggravated or torn, and maybe it's still healing, or, whatever this is, I mean, you've got to be careful with how you present it. It is a day-to-day, week-to-week thing. And so I'm sure that they want him to play. I know he wants to play, but the trainers have the final say. And here's what you're dealing with if you're Kirk Ferentz. One, hey, you want your quarterback to play. I mean, you went out and bought him in the transfer portal. That's what you did. You went and got this guy, and he's the face of your franchise. You have not done anything. You haven't said one word otherwise. Okay, cool. But Utah State, you've got to figure you've got a pretty good opportunity to win, even with maybe an inexperienced quarterback who's making his first career start in Deacon Hill? Can you go out there? You feel like you can establish the run, make some makeables in the passing game, and your defense will shut them down to the point where you feel pretty good. And then make sure your quarterback doesn't re-aggravate his injury, so he's available for Iowa State and for Penn State and for the rest of the Big Ten season. That's what you've got to weigh, and that's what the trainers have to weigh. So I think right now, be cautious, be cautiously optimistic. It sounds like, Kirk is optimistic, but you can't just predict it because, again, somebody else's body, not mine.
Kirk was optimistic. I went back and looked. He said he was optimistic at Kids Day that Cade would be back soon.
Yeah.
And he was optimistic on the Big Ten Network last Friday that Cade would be back soon, which we're almost a week from. And now he's very optimistic he'll be back this week. So optimism is good, but the kid is going through rehab. He's to get better. Until he's better, you just don't know. He could come back and later this week could be today, tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday. We don't know. It seemed like he was felt more positive about it being Monday when they start prep for Utah State, which would be fine if he's back on Monday. But he still has to go through this process, then get back on the field, and then go, like you said, Scott, talk with trainers because they're going to be asking him out there, how do you feel? How does it feel? Because they don't know. They're rehabbing it, but he actually has to go out there and make sure he's healthy enough to play, which is questionable.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think it's a fair designation. And watching the NFL to covering it for 5+ years, it's no big deal. Questionable players play all the time. When they're doubtful, which is another designation, then that's when you go, okay, that's probably, they're doubtful. We doubt he plays. I mean, it's like it goes to 25%, 50%, probable is 75%.
Yeah.
Out, of course, is 0, and then you're not on the injury report, so you're expected to play. We don't have that in college football, and now with gambling issues, it might be good.
How big on Sunday mornings is it, the actives and inactives that people wait for in the NFL? It's because they have those designations throughout the week, but nothing means anything until you see those active and inactive lists. They should do that in college, if you ask me, especially, and we'll get into this in a minute, with the gambling. But for transparency, it's probably a good idea.
Yeah, it is. I think right now,
some do, right?
Yeah, and some do. Some do in the Big Ten. I know Wisconsin does, or they did, and I don't know if they'll do it and continue. Northwestern did, and I don't know if they will to continue.
They've got bigger problems.
Yeah, they've got some issues there. But, I think it's what to me would be, as gambling becomes more and more prevalent and more important, and as we've seen, impactful, I think there's so much of this that right now you just want to, I think some of the stuff needs to be streamlined. And whether that's somebody being listed as out or questionable, let's say that on, Thursday, which is what some teams do, so-and-so is out, so-and-so is questionable. I think that's fair. I think Wisconsin's was out for the season or something like that. And then, find a point in the week. Maybe it's 5:00 on Thursday that everybody has to submit that. I think everybody should submit a freaking 2 deep. I hate that the teams are getting away from that. And it doesn't really have to be accurate necessarily, because, in Iowa's case, when you're starting to talk about offensive linemen, if the shuffle is more important to them. Like, let's say Nick DeYoung starts at right tackle, or let's say he starts at right guard, but the right tackle is ineffective. It's not the right tackle who's listed on the injury report. It's probably Nick DeYoung who will kick out there and they'll put somebody inside. But like Michigan and Minnesota and other teams don't even put a 2 deep. It's like, man, this is a killer on Saturdays. But I'm trying to look, okay, then I got to look through the whole roster instead of a 2 deep, for number 3. And then I'm like, oh, shit, especially if you're dealing with special teamers. So anyway, complaining, old dude, goes hand in hand. But I will say that I just think at some point that we need to be that there needs to be more transparency in college sports, and that's a long way of saying that. Yeah, I think middle of next week they should. And what they'll probably do anyway, Rob, is say questionable, all the way up until half an hour before kickoff. But yeah, 10:30 Central Time on Sunday mornings, we're all glued to our apps and the TV to figure out, all right, okay, he's not playing. I need either A, pick somebody up, or B, move somebody in the starting lineup.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And just to throw this in, Shannon Earhart from KCCI my guess is she had a pre-planned interview with Cade yesterday, probably for a feature story.
Yeah.
But she did ask him about his availability for the opener, and I believe he said he's progressing, and that's all he wants to say about that. So You know what? He's questionable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really.
He's telling you he's questionable.
Yeah, he's not going to give you any kind of one way or the other. That's questionable. That's it. It's a question.
A lot of it, Scott, is we all want to know what's going to happen September 2nd. It's August 24th, and he's healing. So we can't tell you what we don't know is kind of the setup.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's like from the very first day. When that happened, and it, first your biggest fear is that he ACL'd. That's it. Your season's over with.
Yeah, it was one of those turf injuries that make you cringe.
Yeah, and instead it turned out to be whether it was a quad pull or slight quad tear or whatever people are discussing or thinking they're discussing. I mean, the only thing I could tell you for sure is I saw him with a compression wrap on Friday when they were showing him, and that makes sense. I mean, tried to keep everything tight in there, and and I'm sure he's doing his best. But again, when you start talking about football, and then again, when you remember what last year Chris Murray didn't play in the Iowa State game, people were freaking out, and then they won by a 30 or whatever it was. So things happen, and Utah State, I mean, we haven't really said word one about them all year, but their numbers are not real strong, Rob. I mean, this is a team that, they were I think they were a bowl team, but they're a bad bowl team last year. So, and they lost a lot of players to the portal. They got some more too, but their defense was not very good at all. So this is an area where you would expect Iowa to be able to execute even with a backup quarterback. You just tell them, take care of the ball, which is what Iowa likes to do anyway. We'll be okay punting. Punting is winning, remember, but don't do anything stupid. And that might be the big question mark then is Deacon Hill don't throw into triple coverage down the field, just kind of make the makeables. We'll run the ball. If we need a punt, we got the best punter in the country and one of the best defenses in the country while we're at it.
Yep. And we can kick field goals too and win.
Yeah.
Because the Utah State's not going to score much, if at all. So just be patient and we'll flip the field and put you in a good position to make a play. So just hang in there. And I get the sense that sometimes people don't, if it's not an upper body injury for a quarterback, shoulder, arm, something like that, they don't see it as being a problem, but your legs are so important at that position for everything that you do. And if it's, a muscle tissue, things like that, like you said, a break, a sprain, you have a little bit more of a feel for it, but things like that, it's different for every person. And it's one of those things where you can continually re-aggravate it. And that's where you don't want to get into that cycle.
Well, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. He goes out there and for 2.5 quarters, he's fine. He's throwing the ball well. They're up 24-0, let's say, in the middle of the third quarter. Then he's getting chased from behind and he lands awkwardly.
Yeah.
And then it's like, now you're dealing with the possibility that he might not be in against Iowa State or Penn State on the road, Michigan State at home. I mean, So if you've got it, you want to err on the side of caution here. It's a long season. There are a lot more important games in the opener. And if they only win 23-3, yeah, people are going to make fun of you. So what? The next week's more important to beat Iowa State. Going to Happy Valley, you'll take a 3-2 win. It doesn't matter. The 25 points per game thing be damned. You'll take anything, and you're not going to win, dare I say, this year, maybe in the future, but you're not going to win a Happy Valley against that team with Deacon Hill. But you might with Cade McNamara, because last time he was there, he was spectacular, as was Eric All. So when they were with Michigan. So, I think, again, if you got to shut him down for a game, next week's the right one to do.
And it wouldn't be tragedy to have Deacon Hill get a start. I mean, the guy hasn't played. What did Kirk say, since like 2000, when he was in high school or something like that? Because he didn't play at Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. He played he played one game last year.
You're right. He did play one game last year.
It was he got sacked against New Mexico State.
Kind of like Caleb Brown's receiving statistics at Ohio State. Very limited action. I think a sidebar to this, Scott, that I think is maybe understated is Joe Labus being out. He's your most experienced quarterback after Cade. And, he didn't light the world on fire in the Music City Bowl, but he didn't kill him, and they won the game. Him being out all camp is not good. He could have really used the reps this month.
Right. If he would have been available, then they could have made an educated choice about next week necessarily. And I'm not saying he would have been the number 2. Maybe Deacon Hill is, but then you could have something to compare it and say, okay, Deacon Hill, you were better in the spring. You've been better in the summer. We feel pretty good about you. We're going to start you. If you would have had Joe Labus there, but now you're looking at him going, he's probably our only option, because you're not going to start a true freshman. Marco Lane he's got upside. They like him,
or Tommy Pahalski. Yeah. Either true freshman.
Oh man. Yeah, I would that'd be tough. But but he might be your number 2, and Marco might be your number 2. But if you had Joe and you've at least seen Joe do it, and you probably have a little bit better offensive line. Certainly you're not playing against Kentucky, which had a top 14 defense. Mm-hmm. Last year they had to play 7 defenses in the top 14. Nationally, that's pretty damn tough. And so I think overall you just gotta, but then again, it's a long season. You've got big goals. A goal, I assume, is probably winning against Utah State, but that's not the first and most important goal, other than next week, is to win your game. But win your game, move on, bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, no doubt. And we'll deep dive into Utah State next Thursday on the podcast when we preview the game. And maybe next week, Scott and I also do our game-by-game predictions on here to let people know kind of where we're at going into the season. Obviously, Cade McNamara, as we've just spent the first part of the podcast talking about, is a very key component to what Iowa is capable of doing this season. Also on the injury front, it sounds like doing pretty well. Everybody has a chance to get back next week, with the exception of Jeff Bowie. Terrible to hear that. Covered him in high school at West Branch. Great kid. Feel bad for him. I saw him. I don't know if you saw him at Kids Day, Scott. He had like an immobilizer, I think, on one of his arms. So some type of upper body surgery, I would imagine. And didn't sound like outlook was good for him this upcoming season, or at least the first part. So bummer for him. But overall, sounds like they're in pretty good shape health-wise.
Yeah, it did sound that way. Nico Ragaini has been out most of camp. I think it was an ankle issue is what I'd overheard. But
he's old, man. When you get old, it's muscles, things start to hurt.
Believe me, every morning it's like, I need a good night's sleep, but then your muscles pay for it by having it happen. But he's like, well, when you're 28 years old, and he's actually only 24, but still, it's kind of funny. He's not even the oldest guy on the team. That's Torrey Taylor.
Yeah.
So, yeah, anyway, I think it's funny. No, I think he'll play, and you look at it, and that's not bad. And he said he dodged a bullet on Saturday, that there was somebody they thought might have had a pretty significant one. It didn't happen. Players aren't practicing. But he sounds like everybody's got a chance to play next week, and we'll follow it as close as we can.
There's always that stage, right? There's those injuries that you're not putting a person ahead of another person, but the ones that are going to impact you more. Like if Cooper DeJean gets hurt with the thinness at cornerback, that's a problem.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? But if, and we'll get to Noah Shannon, there's depth on the defensive line, you can absorb an injury a little bit more. So there's kind of nuance and some context to injuries as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you look at, it depends on where, offensive line, there's a little bit of depth there, but, if it's Logan Jones, you're in real big trouble, and whether or not he's, all Big Ten caliber or not, I think he'll take some steps forward. He's a guy that I think is going to be strong, but that said, he's your center. He snapped every game last year. And so you'd be like, okay, what do we do now? Is it Tyler Ellsbury? I mean, Mike Bislitsky, we haven't seen, he's been hurt. But whereas if it's a guard, I'm not going to say one, but just any guard, then you could probably weather it a little bit better. Same thing on defense, as you said, defensive tackle, they're in the best position they've ever been depth wise, so they can absorb a loss like Noah Shannon. But if it's Cooper DeJean or, because he was out Kids Day, if he was hurt and they needed him and they missed him, or Jamari Harris might be out a couple of games with an injury or something, then they're like, okay, one of the young guys is going to have to step up there. So yeah, it's all relative to the position, no question.
Yep, and we'll get a better idea on Tuesday after they've practiced a couple times where things are at, depending on what coach wants to release. There really is no benefit for him to come out and say, Cade's ready to go.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's a benefit because it gets your fan base going, but it doesn't do anything from a strategic standpoint. If you, like we talked about earlier, if you don't have to release an injury report, don't.
Yeah, right. You want to keep them guessing. You want the other team to prepare for both. And although I would say this, that if I was preparing for Cade McNamara versus Deacon Hill, all I'll say is, well, neither one are necessarily super mobile. I would say, in Cade, you would expect even if he's out there, he's probably feeling a little bit gingery, so he's not going to run. It's not like you're dealing with Michael Vick or something out there, the only difference in their throwing abilities is Cade is much more calculated and accurate. Deacon's got probably a bit stronger arm, so he'll go down the field, but that's an adjustment you can make in game. That's not anything that you need to worry about. So for Kirk Ferentz, there's not any film on Deacon Hill. There's nothing, other than to probably go through your Twitter, Hawkeye Nation videos that you posted at Kids Day or something. But, I think they'd be, there's no advantage in either way, probably for Iowa. I mean, Utah State's not going, wonder what he's going to put down, and,
yeah,
it's just not, it is what it is, as they say.
Yeah, they should prepare for a healthy dose of Caleb Johnson.
Yeah,
because that's what they're going to get. And LaShawn Williams and Jazz Patterson. I think all of those guys are going to get plenty of work in the opener.
Yeah. See, that would be the one where I would say you would have to prepare. I mean, if you're going to get the difference between Caleb Johnson and the other running backs, that's when you've got to prepare for, or a tight end being out or something. Because then, tight end, what you got to prepare for with Iowa now is like 12 personnel. I think they're going to run the shit out of 12 personnel, which is 2 tight ends, 2 receivers, 1 running back. Because that's, when you got 2 tight ends like that, and hopefully this year nobody gets called a specialist. But if you do, I think you're going to use those 2 tight ends to the nth degree, because they are NFL players. Wide receivers are improved, but they're not NFL players yet. And your running back probably is too. an NFL player.
Yeah, I saw something on three this morning. I think Tom Kakert, a friend from Hawkeye Report, retweeted it. Powerade has returned to NIL, signing 5 college football players with plans for a national ad campaign. And they are Jared Verse, old friend,
Yeah.
Jaden Daniels, Malachi Starks, Mario Williams, and Caleb Johnson.
Wow.
That's nice.
Yeah, that's nice. That shows
for Caleb.
Yeah. And Iowa's a Powerade school. So that's probably helpful. You know, I'm sure if they were a Gatorade school, he wouldn't be on that list.
No, he wouldn't. Maybe Gatorade will do an NIL for somebody else.
Yeah.
I can't keep track of all this shit.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I just, the only way I know about the Powerades is that's what John Bonenkamp stocks up on. So if they had Gatorade, I'd probably stock up.
He should do it. Bonenkamp should get an NIL deal with Powerade. The way the way he promotes that brand, they need to. They could do a combo ad with him and Caleb Johnson. Powerade together.
Well, they ought to just have, John, who, is somebody, a friend of ours for a long, long time, out there with the cannon, the hot dog cannon, except shooting Powerades into the cannon.
To Caleb Johnson.
Yeah, to Caleb Johnson's Awesome.
Oh, man. You know what? This is a good time, I think, for us to take a break so I can gather myself after that. Want to let folks know that support for this podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Thank you to Systems Unlimited. Hear from a few more of our sponsors here, and Scott and I will be back on the other side to talk about Noah Shannon and the gambling investigation. Hang in there. We are back on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. I've gotten myself settled in after our little stretch there of making fun of John Bonenkamp. We weren't making fun of John. We were promoting his affinity for a certain sports drink.
Yeah.
Want to got another read here for folks. I got a tip for you guys. You have to check out Randy Engel's artwork at underthekitchen.square.site. That is underthekitchen.square.site. Pretty incredible stuff that Randy produces there, and you can find pieces on some of your favorite Hawkeye athletes, past and present. Tim Dwight, Spencer Lee, Keegan and Chris Murray. They're all available. There are others as well. Reasonably priced, come with certificates of authenticity. Check out that site, underthekitchen.square.site. And check out Randy's artwork available for your Hawkeye room in your house, the office, whatever it may be. And if you're in the area and you're going to Fry Fest, Randy will be set up there with his artwork. So check him out. Make sure to check out his booth at Fry Fest. Again, underthekitchen.square.site. Go to Fry Fest and you won't have to purchase from the site. You can go and purchase it in person. So check that out. Thanks to Randy for supporting the podcast. Scott, after however many months of this gambling investigation since it broke during baseball season, we're getting a little bit of resolution here. And just to get folks up to speed, the university released a press release on, is that Tuesday night, I believe? Saying that 11 student athletes had received for punishment, for lack of a better term, from the NCAA for their involvement in this gambling investigation. And according to FERPA law, these student athletes need to give permission for coaches, people at Iowa to talk about their situations. And the only one that has done so is the one we were aware of, Noah Shannon, when he went public and said that he was part of the investigation. And I thought in a classy way, pulled out of the Big Ten Media Day in Indianapolis last month, and then spoke very candidly about it at Media Day as well. And he did give Kirk Ferentz permission to talk about it. And Kirk let us know yesterday that Noah received a 1-year, 1-season suspension. Pretty heavy-handed, but Kirk also let us know that Noah did bet on an Iowa sports team, and I think that's why the suspension is as long as it is. And we've kind of gone over this, Scott. We can debate, what the rules should be, the changing landscape, and all that. I feel awful for Noah. That said, these guys knew the rules, and is the suspension too long? We could debate that too. Does the punishment fit the crime? We'll see. They're going to appeal it, but he's going to miss significant time, and he bet on an Iowa sports team. That's probably fair.
Yeah, that's tough, and it is tough, and I know a lot of people will disagree with that because I think.
And I want to clarify. I'm not saying a year is fair, but you deserve more than a slap on the wrist for this.
Right. This is everybody was notified. This isn't something that everybody, oh man, when did this happen? No, we knew about it. They've had that discussed before several times. It's just a matter of now here we reached this point. And even in June, when the NCAA streamlined those rules, part of that was, okay, bet under $200, you're just going to get educated. And if it's under $500, it's 10% of your season. Under $800, it's 20% of your season. Then over that, it's 30% or more. And oh, by the way, if you gambled on your own school, you could face a permanent ban. And that's where it looks like Noah's landed. I mean, he did bet on a Iowa sport, and
we think it's women's basketball.
Yeah,
right? I don't want to. Right. That's just us speculating based on what we've heard. It's not. Do not take that as gospel.
Right, and that's been the rumor from day one. That's been the rumor.
And he wasn't alone.
No,
I've heard.
No, he was not. And so I think there's some others from another sport that are dealing with that too. So, but when you're looking across the board, I think there are 3 players there are 5, it looks like, that are on the current roster as of yesterday or 2 days ago that face significant penalties. Noah, obviously a year suspension, but it wasn't anything legal. Legally, Aaron Blum and Jack Johnson, they've been charged. And when Kirk mentioned serious consequences, we know that they're never going to play again. I mean, you've been charged with that. And he even drew the line betting on, your own team. That's a no that I think everybody should have. That one to me is non-negotiable. I'm sorry. Even if Cade McNamara did it, that's non-negotiable. But then, then there are 2 others. And one I'm pretty aware of, smaller suspension. The other one, it's been kind of up and down. There's been one person that's been rumored, but that seems not to be the case. And then there's somebody else that I'm not as sure of. So rather than risk any kind of credibility and throw a name out there, I'd rather not. But when it comes to Noah, that's a significant loss for Iowa in a lot of ways. Obviously, a productive player, honorable mention, all Big Ten. 2-year starter going into year 3, 6th year of eligibility. That's, he came back just to play football. I mean, he didn't need to come back for school. So this is a really tough situation for him. And I think the best they can do, Rob, is maybe get it down to a half season, but I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. This is the quote. I think this is from a question you asked Kirk yesterday, Scott. And he said, quote, "You have a couple of guys looking at serious consequences potentially. We have a couple guys looking at suspensions and another guy who is in the appeal state." And that was just the general overview from Kirk on where they are.
Yeah. So,
I should add, I can say this, they're both multi-games. One's longer than the other. I'm sure that's based on whatever criteria they base it on, and we'll live with that. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So it to me, that sounds like we're not even going to appeal that. And if it is 2 games, which has been the discussion point for one of the players, by the time you get through the appeal process, 2 games are up and you're not going to play anyway. So just accept it, take your medicine and go home for 2 weeks. And then, the other one, I don't know if it's 4, I've heard 4, but that's still, that's seismic, but again, you might be 3.5 weeks into the season. So maybe it is worth it. I don't know, but it sounds like, and that's what Kirk kind of confirmed, that all their appeal baskets are on Noah. They want to get him out there and playing. And, and it's weird, you think about this from a couple of different perspectives. And could this actually be a help to the team? Not Noah necessarily, but to the team, where you've got a guy who is just cleared to practice from shoulder surgery. And let's say they reduce it from 12 games to 8 or 6. And you've got him there ready to go for the final month and a half of the season. Somebody who hasn't been beat up yet, somebody with that kind of talent, and his shoulder is much healthier than it was even now. The benefit could be pretty good, for him to come back. And it's like, hey, you're back for the Wisconsin game, okay, good deal. That's not the worst game in the world to come back for, if you're a defensive tackle.
Yeah.
Which of course other teams will be like, no, it's not fair.
I will say I feel a little bit better. Not that he was injured and had surgery, but he wouldn't have been able to work out. I guess he could have put off the surgery, but then he would have had to gone through the medicals and everything for NFL. If he would have, what I'm saying is, if he would have decided not to come back for a 6th year, it would have been tough for him to go through the NFL draft process because of his health. So I don't think, it's not like, oh shit, he came back and missed his chance at the NFL this spring, because I think he'll be in a better position next year, provided he's healthy, to take his shot. The sad thing for him is, and I'm hoping this isn't the case, and Kirk kind of put this out there yesterday, if the NCAA says you're suspended for a year and you can't even be with the team, you can't be in the building, to me, that's BS.
Yeah.
I think that's overreaching. And it sounds like Kirk is just preparing himself for that being a possibility, that he can't have any involvement with the team this year. I hope they don't do that.
I agree with you on that. That's really unfair. Because when you're talking about human beings, you're not talking about robots. And it's one thing, if you're, this was, he made a mistake. It was a big one. It's his own fault. I'm not going to say that, things happen, but in the scheme of things, Rob, and this is where it's blurry. It's gray area to me. Does he deserve to be punished? Yes. Because they're told not to do that, and you did it. So therefore you're punished. But which is worse? And I hate, the whataboutisms, but which is worse, getting an OWI or doing this? Well, you get 1 game suspension, team rules for your OWI. And that's the other part that I'm questioning with FERPA is, we know about the suspensions for team rules, but FERPA, NCAA violations, you're not. I think that might be a little bit much. So anyway, I don't know if I'm going to fight that or not. We'll see. But either way, I think what we're looking at is some. With when it comes to Noah, I hope he's with the team throughout the course of the year. That'd be really unfair. And I think in his case, he could be a benefit from that, rehab, be around it. Doesn't have to dress. Health. Yeah.
He's been through a shitload this year with his injury and being sidelined and rehab. Mm-hmm. And now you're telling him he can't even be with his friends. To me, that's too much.
Yeah, exactly. And now if Kirk was to remove Aaron Blum and Jack Johnson, and maybe he has. I haven't even looked at the roster today. I'm all right with that because it's first of all, it's legal, but second of all, when you bet on your own team, I think that is a line too far, no matter what. The only way I would ever slightly condone that, Rob, is if you're in a NCAA tournament pool, and you're picking your team, but that's it. It just when you're taking the under on an Iowa State game. Well, luckily for him, it was the year before, but because it would have been last year and he missed that field goal, that would have been bad news. But and I actually saw him the other day while I was at a coffee shop. So and the same thing with the Iowa State players. They're drilled way worse than Iowa is. And so I
saw the Big 12 is coming up with some mechanism to keep an eye on or monitor the athletes in terms of sports gambling. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, I don't either.
Unless they give you the right to access their apps on their phone. I don't know how else legally you would be able to do that. Yeah.
We're in a weird world, Rob. Things have changed so much in the last couple of years, and just to give some context here, a week ago when we last talked, it was before Beth Getz talked. So there was a lot there with her, but and the reason why I thought about that was in 2026, college sports could be so much different than today and a lifetime's different from 2016. So I think we're, when it comes to gambling, I get what Kirk is saying. I think he's sticking up for his guys. I agree to some of it, not all of it, because I do think that there needs to be some lines drawn. And if you bet, here again, here's where the gray line is. That, earlier in the summer when we talked about this, I'm like, yeah, well, athletes hang out with athletes, and if you're going to know and that sort of thing. So that's why I do think that it merits a long suspension. However, students hang out with athletes too. There are girlfriends, boyfriends, there are friends, there are dorm mates, roommates, parties. So they can get access to a lot of that same information too. And there's no penalty for that. Is a year fair? I don't know. I think it's probably a bit much, but I think half a year is at least the penalty that's appropriate. And maybe I'm a bad guy for saying that, but I think that there does need, they're aware of it. They knew about it. And, Noah, whether he got caught up in the moment, hey, they're going to the Final Four, I'm going to throw X number of dollars at it. Doesn't mean he's a bad guy. In fact, I think it's the opposite. I think he's been a stand-up human being through this whole process, but I just don't think that it's probably warrants, removal for the rest of his career. I think that's probably a bit much.
No, and there's I agree with you, and to add to people who aren't familiar at all with the world of gambling and kind of how things have changed over time. I mean, the bookies used to pay people to, bird dog for them. That's the wrong term, but pay students that are on campus to get close with the student athletes to try to get inside information. That's what Scott's speaking to in terms of compromising the integrity of the competition. And when you bet on your own team, that is a major infraction and compromises integrity of the game everywhere for everybody. If you know that people are betting on their own teams, and we've seen it at the two in-state universities, we know it's happening elsewhere around the country. That's why this has to be nipped in the bud now. It's a shame that Iowa and Iowa State were made examples of it, but as Scott said, the rules were clear. They were delivered to these student athletes time and time again. They knew that it was a no-no and did it anyway. I do think they need to, because you think about what Kelvin Sampson did, and what he got, raked over the cloud. And I'm not standing up for Kelvin Sampson. Yeah. I wouldn't do that. But think about what he did and what the rules are now, in terms of text messages and contacting recruits and how that's changed over time. I think you need to update, the rules a little bit more and make it a little more clear about, what's no and what's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like you said, our NCAA tournament pool's okay. Is betting on the NFL okay? Or the NBA, or can you only bet on sports that aren't, do you stick with that rule that you cannot bet on sports that are offered at the NCAA level?
If you wanted to streamline this, Rob, and this is where I would probably go, is, I understand the thought of don't do the NBA if you're if you're an athlete. And I almost think that that's probably outdated at this point. We talked earlier in the summer about the possibility of Keegan Murray telling Chris Murray, and then maybe somebody sitting around and then they make a bet because of it. Keegan Murray could go to get his hair cut or go to a restaurant and be talking to somebody, and they could be doing the same thing. Yeah. So I think that's kind of outdated. If you want to make things simple, Rob, I think it's okay. You can bet on everything you want, but if you bet on anything NCAA related, it's a year suspension, period. Anything. You bet on Illinois football, you bet on the national title game, done for a year. If you bet on your own school or, from now on, or, especially your own team, you're dead. You're not going to play anymore, ever again. And, whether that's going forward, or maybe it's a situation where, because I think you do need to make those harsh rules, because one event can compromise it, and I'm not saying no Shannon betting on the women to upset South Carolina, because man, I'm feeling it, is different than somebody who maybe has a girlfriend, or, on the women's basketball team, or his coach is his dad's the coach, something like that, or then spilling the beans onto somebody else. And then, whatever, that could really be something that could spiral out of control. So I could understand that. It's just,
just modernize it. You modernize the food rules, which were ridiculous.
Yeah.
The contact with recruits, official visits. Remember those? They've changed that. I mean, you need to examine this. It's become so much. It's changed so much with states legalizing sports gambling that, again, the NCAA getting ahead of it. Yeah, right. It's reactive. It's always reactive when it's time to react.
Yeah. And the one thing with the NCAA is it is a collection of all the colleges
True.
And the institutions. And it is the most bureaucratic organization next to the federal government we have in our society. And when you have bureaucracy there, and then you have bureaucracy on campuses, and trying to get their hands on something that's moving fast, whether it's gambling or rules or anything like that, it is very difficult to get. It is like turning around a semi, in the Iowa football parking lot, it takes you forever to get it done. So I think in some ways it's understandable, and the pressure's on Iowa, but it's really more about the big picture. And unfortunately, Noah Shannon could be a casualty of that. But I do think it's at some point, whether it's a tiered system of, because they're saying, well, you could gamble on boxing or MMA or something like that, but you can't gamble on racing, but you can't gamble on the NFL or NHL or, it's like, well, come on, man. But when you're in NBA finals, players do that. I think if you just say, nothing college related, you're fair. If it's fair game, go gamble at, we want to bet on the NBA, fine. Nothing college related. And if you gamble on something college related, it's a year. If you gamble on your own team, it's your life. You're not going to play ever again. I think that tiered system probably would be fair across the board.
Yeah, I agree. The no-nos seem pretty clear. And then after that, like we talked about, is it sports that, the NCAA offers? Is it, where does March Madness and everybody in the world is filling out a bracket? Where does that fall in? they have a lot of people making a lot of money. They should be able to figure this out and come up with some type of, list of guidelines, right? So everybody knows going in. But as we said, the folks that have been punished for what we've seen in this gambling investigation, they knew what they were doing. They've been told what they were doing isn't allowed, and they did it anyway. And then from there, you use the speeding ticket analogy that I've used since the beginning. Why isn't everybody else getting a speeding ticket? We were all going the same speed, and they pull one car over. You fucking got unlucky this time.
Yes, right. Yeah, exactly.
And everybody else.
And I have. Yeah, exactly. They all got lucky. But I had a side conversation yesterday afternoon when I was out and about with a current football player. Yeah, and kind of the same rationale was, hey, they knew it's unfair, it's unfortunate. And he brought up a game last year where the players on the other team were like, sweet, we got the under, because they were betting on it. And he's like, so everybody's doing it. It's Iowa being made an example of, and it's not really that far off from what happened almost 100 years ago when Iowa got caught with a slush fund, and it was made an example in the Big Ten too. And it is a teachable moment, no question. You have, I talked to Josh Whitman with Illinois a few weeks ago, and he's like, yeah, we make these teachable moments. You bring this up, there's what happened. And so I think in some ways, now everybody's on high alert for this. And so if you do it now, it's your ass. But that said, I wish Noah the best. I hope that they can get it reduced, because there's some people that you look at and you're like, you know what, you kind of deserve it. Noah's such a good guy, and he's been upfront about this the whole time, that you'd really hate to see something bad happen to him. Now, going back to what you said, NFL wise, here's the benefit sort of for that is he would not have been healthy enough to compete in the spring, to go through the pro day. He probably would have had a failed physical that he signed as a free agent contract. And then those players wilt away. They just don't, they're lucky if they get a camp invite the next year, because, in Noah's case, he's 6'0", 290 pounds. He's not, 6'6". He's not YA Black in build. Let's put it that way.
No.
So he would be an uphill climb to make a roster anyway. And so he wouldn't have been healthy enough. And it's not like a guy that's a priority. So if this doesn't work out, but he can still remain with the team, and he can still work out at Iowa and work out for the draft and do all those types of things, then this actually will be more beneficial for him than leaving the program in January and trying to be in the NFL, because maybe he'd have an opportunity in Canada, the XFL, USFL, but and the NFL would have been an even bigger long shot than it already would be.
So here's this Big 12 thing I was talking about, Scott. The Big 12 Conference and U.S. Integrity Today announced, this was from yesterday, a partnership that will provide the conference with monitoring software and tools that will play a pivotal role in preventing student athletes, coaches, and staff from engaging in prohibited sports wagering. This partnership will also see Big 12 officials and each Big 12 institution provided access to U.S. Integrity's monitoring software and resources. These resources include annual on-site training for student athletes, coaches, staff, and officials, weekly integrity monitoring across all sports, and access to the Prohibit. It's funny. It's spelled Prohibit system.
Okay.
So basically it's monitoring software. I would think you would need to get permission for that to like monitor however 120 football players. That's just one sport.
Yeah, I mean, I would be interested in knowing how that worked, because when you start to deal with people's intruding on people's lives, then, is that when government gets too big, and so I'm anxious to hear more about that. And maybe I'll talk to somebody with Iowa State and see what we got. But This is but there should be red flags going up everywhere. I mean, what's happened at Iowa for Noah Shannon is terrible for him personally. For Iowa at that position group, it's not the worst news they could have received. However, when you look at Iowa State, it is. I mean, you lose your starting quarterback, your starting running back, your starting left tackle, starting defensive tackle, and starting tight end. You have other players, a drafted player. You have other players who are not going to be. I mean, they're decimated. And that's not to say that they can't upset Iowa or somebody else, but to look at that team losing all those players and think, oh, yeah, they're going to be competing for the Big 12 championship is laughable. I mean, it's just to them, they're going to be, now their left tackle, Jake Remsburg, he might have an outside shot at getting back. I think he will get back. He's actually back to practice, which the other ones weren't. But, Brock left the team. Decker's left the team. I can't speak to Isaiah Lee, but I cannot imagine in any way, shape, or form that he would ever be a part of that team again, based on betting them to lose in a game, and then they won 30-7. Now, how bad does that look? Not only are you gambling on your own team to lose, but then you win by 23. Holy cow, what did you do? What were you thinking?
Never bet again. I mean, talk about a miscalculation.
Yeah. I mean, Iowa State always plays Texas tough, especially at home. And then you bet on them to get beat and they win decisively. I mean, come on. You're the worst gambler. You're like mush and a Bronx Tale. They'll lock you in the closet over there, I don't think I never want to go to the casino with you, but
let's talk some football, Scott. I think Tom Kakert asked the question about the offensive line yesterday. We did get a little football talk. And again, Kirk seemed optimistic about the strides they've made at that position. Sounds like they're very much open to rotations and probably going to see that. They haven't settled on anything yet, which I guess doesn't really surprise me. And some of that could be with guys in and out of the lineup too. You don't know health-wise how much everybody has been available, but with the way the unit has performed the last 2 years, I say keep the competition open as long as you can.
No reason to shut it down. I mean, if I was to wager, well, figuratively, not literally.
Here we go again. With gambling.
Yeah, right. If I was to wager that there's going to be an offensive lineman that might miss a game or two for injury, and if that's the case, Rob, you're going to need somebody to step in. And one thing that George Barnett told me a couple weeks ago when I asked him, and he's like, when they want to get to 7. That's kind of the ideal number for them. 7 players they feel like they can step in and push. But the one fear that they have is, let's say you've got 2 players that are comparable ability. You don't want to cut them off and then, kind of remove that trajectory, if you will, for maybe they're just kind of working at the same level. Maybe one will be better the more work they get with the lead unit. So, I think right now you can spot 7, 8 for sure, if not 9. That really have a chance to be a part of that. And I mean, the big 3 to me, you got Richmond, you got Colby, and you got Jones. And I think in some order they're going to start. Now, Colby was been left guard. Is he going to be right guard? It's going to be one of those 2 spots because he started 11 games at right guard 2 years ago. He started 7 at right tackle and 6 at left guard last year. So he's got some positional flexibility. It's going to be one of those 2 guard spots. I would expect Nick DeYoung to be very, very competitive for a spot, at least early on, rotational wise, possibly. But, he started 17 games all over the place. Listen to this: 8 at right tackle, 2 at left tackle, 5 at left guard, 2 at right guard. So he's started games, more than 1 game at 4 different spots. Now he's probably better suited as a guard. Is he going to be a guard opposite Colby, or is that going to be Feth? And how does Feth fit in? I mean, it is a step up to go every single day from Miami of Ohio to University of Iowa. And when you look at the defensive tackles that he's competing against, there's some NFL dudes there.
Baptism by fire.
Yeah. It's like you're going against Y.A. Black and Aaron Graves and Logan Lee, and for a short period of time, Noah Shannon. You're talking about one of the best.
Then down the list, here comes Jeremiah Pittman and Ontario Thompson.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't stop. It's just the constant flow.
Yeah. Third down. Hey, there's this freshman named Brian Allen that's slipping inside, and he looks like Chauncey Golston. It's like, shoot, damn. You're really getting thrown that way. So, is he up to that level? And that's a fair question to ask. And I always kind of thought, hey, this team needs a Rusty, and he looks the part, but either he might not be. Maybe he's back end, or maybe he's rotational. You look at Bo Stevens; he started 10 games last year. Tyler Ellsbury started 2 games. Jennings Dunker is outside. He had one career start, but that was in the bowl because he earned it. And then, Dejon Parker, he's been injured a lot, and that really sucks. But, he's taken a huge step up as well, going from Division II to, battling Deontay Craig and Joe Evans every day. And two guys had 6+ sacks last year. So there's a lot of work there, and it makes sense. It's like, Colby, to me, Richmond and Jones are set. Left tackle and center are set.
Yeah, I agree.
Colby is a starter. DeYoung is probably a starter. But then, do you rotate? Do you, is somebody not good enough? If somebody hurt, where do you go at right tackle? And Dunker has all the ability in the world, but I wasn't real blown away by his pass pro on Kids Day. Is that just one bad practice, or is that he's got a lot of work to do? What can you risk there, especially if you got a gimpy quarterback right now?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, a lot of questions, and I'm sure that's probably why they're still working through this. And then they want to see how they rotate, because you just don't know. You just don't know when you get into game action. Somebody might get hurt. Somebody might improve. Dunker and Stevens, for instance, are sophomores. Maybe their trajectory just continues to climb. And if you get in a situation where, I'm just using this as an example, that maybe what you got with Rusty Feth, and it's okay. Bo Stevens maybe not quite there in some areas, but he's just continuing to climb. Do you want to inhibit that progress? Those are real questions to ask. And because maybe by November, maybe Bo Stevens is your guy, or maybe Jennings Dunker is like, he's not quite a right tackle, but man, inside he could be an ass kicker at a guard, and I think those are all fair, and those are healthy questions to ask for this team.
Yeah. It's, as you know, it's not only, how you look individually, but how do you fit into the group? How do you, in zone blocking, are you screwing up and not do, it's more than just being able to hit the guy across from you. There's a lot more to it than that.
Mm-hmm, no question. And, I saw some, they ran a lot of counter, and I don't know if that's that's what they're planning to do, or if that's just, hey, we're going to just show you this a little bit. I liked it. I liked it a lot. I thought it looked really good. And I thought, but how they perform, that's going to be, backside, are you going to be able to hit your reach block from the backside if you're running outside zone? Some guys can't. And then it turns into a clip, and it's accidental. You think you're right in front of them, but you're not. And then we're going to hear the cut block thing, Kirk's freak out.
Yeah, as soon as you said clip, it took me to all the times we've gone through this conversation about the rule.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think, like you said, Scott, a guy may look one way in practice because he kind of knows what the guy across from him is doing. You practice against the same defense every day. And granted, you get top-notch competition every day with that defensive line, but it's different when you get out there, week 2, and you're in a hostile environment at Jack Trice. It's loud, you've got to kind of go, be able to identify, maybe not verbal communication, but hands, things like that. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. And then maybe when you're out there, and that's like you were saying, this may take a few weeks to sort through to decide who the best guys are, the best 5 are, and then other guys that may deserve time as well to get in their rotational.
No question. When you talk about Jack Trice, I mean, the thing is they've been practicing against Iowa all camp, and that's, a 40 front every time, and they're shading a little bit one way or the other, there may be a certain gap or something, but they're largely 2 gapping up front. When you're going against them, you're looking at a 3-3-5, and you're looking at just a completely different type of setup, and they're really good at it. I don't know that they're going to be a good team necessarily, but they were damn good on defense last year. And now they don't have Will McDonald; he's with your Jets, but they've got a chance to hold down this Iowa offense, and you've got to be prepared. And the way that Iowa is like. Up front, they're built more to lateral first step. It's run based, stop the run. So their first step is lateral. Other teams are absolute penetration. Penn State is that way. Mm-hmm. And so you might not be expecting this quick first step right off the ball. And if you can't handle that, you're going to see a lot of negative losses. Now, if you can, you'll be all right. You'll kick their ass. But if you can't, you're going to see a lot of Caleb Johnson minus 2 yards and or some sacks because and that's something that they're going to have to watch. So I'm anxious to see it, and I really wish we could talk more about that this offseason, but it's just been like in my case, realignment, gambling, Cade McNamara's injury, rinse, wash, who are they going to play, all that kind of stuff.
What you hope for too here is, and we've seen this in the past, 2008 comes to mind, just kind of, there's going to be, there will be speed bumps early on as they work through this. Like we just talked about, trying to find the best 5 and rotation pieces and how this all fits together. What you hope is, you get better through play in September, you're better in October, and then, you hit your stride as the season goes on. And that's, once you get into the meat of conference play, that's when you want to be able to have this thing ready to roll. And who knows where it's going to be week 4 against Penn State. That's a tough challenge anyway. That won't define where this offensive line will be, but you need to be better by the time you get to Wisconsin, and certainly by like Illinois and Minnesota. That's kind of when you need to be hitting your stride as an offensive line.
Yeah, because like Penn State might be the best defense in the Big Ten. They might be the best defense in the country. And Iowa might be too, but think about this. How much faith would you have Iowa's offense going against Iowa's defense for 4 quarters? Not a whole lot. 3 to 4 scores. You just hope they're touchdowns.
Yeah.
That's really what you've got to sign up for, and not worry about, you get 25 points out there, Brian Ferentz is fired. That's stupid. You got to win the game, and your defense might be able to handle that too, but you're gonna have to move the ball a little bit. But if they lose at Happy Valley, it's not the end of the season, because you know what, they're going to beat almost everybody else too. Michigan, Ohio State, Iowa, maybe a playoff team. That's going to be their main competition this year. What you got to hope for is just to continue to build, because if they go out there and let's say they lose 24-14, which I think is not the worst possibility in the world. That doesn't affect how you play against Wisconsin or Minnesota or Illinois, as you said, or at Nebraska, and whether or not you get to Indianapolis, and you could be at one hell of a team by the time you reach that. You brought up I wrote a couple of times this summer about the 07-08 changes. And in 07, they gave up 46 sacks. Jay Christensen was all over the place, as we know, accuracy wise. They had Brian Bulaga playing as a true freshman at left guard. They had Dace Richardson was pretty much out. One game he got to play. You got Kyle Callaway playing left tackle. You got Raphael Eubanks. Rob Bruggeman was out. So you had injuries. You had youth. Travis Meade started a bunch of games. And they gave up 46 sacks. They ran for 3.5 yards per carry, and they had a really good running back in Albert Young. It just wasn't working out. The next year it did, and Sean Green was a big reason for that. But Jewel Hampton was pretty good too. And I think, then they decided, all right, Brian Bulaga is a left tackle. There's some similarities at that stage between Mason Richmond and Brian Bulaga. I'm not going to say that they're the best, they're equal. Brian Bulaga would turn out to be a pretty good player. But, Logan Jones and Rob Bruggeman, there's some parallels there. There's some parallels with a lot of this stuff. And I do think, I was glad I was able to write about Caleb Johnson, because I think he's going to be an ass kicker. I think he's going to be a fucking good player,
And I think you'd agree with me. I think this offensive line is at least adequate with a chance to be a lot better in run blocking. Mm-hmm. It's the pass pro that is a little shaky right now.
Right, absolutely, and that's been the concern, especially on the edge, and when they're playing against Chop Robinson from Penn State, or you got take your pick from Wisconsin on the edge, or even Iowa State for that matter. You're going to have some guys getting around them, and you're going to have to be, and that's what we saw with Dunker, because when you see him go against Joe Evans is a good player, man, and he could be like, he might be a better like stand-up linebacker, blitzer type at Wisconsin than he is in the 4-3 at Iowa, but he's still pretty good. And so, but what they did when they jumped from 07 to 08, they ran for 4.8 yards per carry. They cut their sacks down from 46 to 24, I think it was 24 or 26. They were a much improved unit. I expect to have them to be a much improved unit. Good. I'm not going to go there yet. I want to see it, but decent, I think is certainly an expectation. And so it's really just going to depend on the smaller details and where they improve.
Talk more about that next week. We'll see a depth chart by then, updated depth chart for what that's worth. But we can talk about that next week too, as we get ready for the first game. I know it's been a week, Scott, but you were at the Beth Getz press conference. We won't dive too deep in this because it's a little dated, but what were your takeaways?
I was probably just as impressed, if not more so, than I was going into it. And I knew a lot about Beth. I talked to a lot of people about Beth, and I think she's has a great impression nationally. And I thought she did an outstanding job for what we know, for what she said, because she seems well prepared, but she seems at ease. She understands the topics. She had an answer for them, and it was just, again, at ease. It was comfortable for her to have those kind of question and answer sessions. And she's has one of the things that I think she talked about was just the future and what is coming down the pipe. And there's a place in this world in college athletics for people who think like Gary Barta, which is pretty conservative to let's just hold the line on certain things. And, but I think in Beth's case, she understands that whether it's sharing revenue with athletes, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And it's so much better to have ideas and thoughts at the beginning as opposed to react, which is what's been the whole entire existence of the NCAA for a century now. So I came away very impressed by her. I think she understands her place. She also understands looking at the legacies of the coaches that she has there, that nobody is like Iowa. Nobody has this kind of, institutional memory and success when you're looking at across and you see Tom Brands and Lisa Bluter and Kirk Ferentz and Fran McCaffrey, and 3 out of the 4 probably are Hall of Famers. And, Fran was going to be the all-time winningest coach in Iowa basketball history. And then others like Lisa Salucci and, Rick Heller. I mean, you've got some, historically very, very good coaches at these.
Joey
Woody. It goes on and on. I mean, Renee Gillespie hasn't done a lot yet here, but she has a lot of success before. And so, but she understands that. But I think she's got from what I've gathered, Rob, she's got a lot of respect from people here that, it says something to me when the women's basketball coaches and players arrive at 1 a.m. from Europe and they have a press conference 12 hours later and you see all of them there lined up to like, not only, to clap for her, to be there to support her. They think highly of her. And And I think that's something that we should take note of. And I'd like to see, I understand the vibe from some fans about opening it up nationally, but let me be honest for a minute. She's better than 2/3 of the ADs already sitting. What are you looking for? It's not, hey, let's get Bob Stoops. Well, you need an administrator. You don't need that anymore. It's not, it's not somebody just to have some beers with. Barry Alvarez was the last of that breed. And I think that's something that if her name was Ben Getz, would you be saying, hey, we can't let her, this guy go? That's what you'd think. You need to say the same thing about Beth Getz, because I think she and Josh Whitman just might be the two best ADs in the Big Ten. And she's had a lot of experience. She's been shut down. She lost twice. She was number 2 choice at Minnesota. And at that point, she wasn't the right choice that time because they needed a little bit more stability. She was the interim. She didn't have the experience that she has now. And then Wisconsin, that was an inside job all the way with Chris McIntosh. This is not the case here because she's not an Iowa Hawkeye, but she understands the business and the school probably as good or better than anybody else.
Yeah, she seems like well-liked throughout the industry, has connections, excuse me, and that is what is encouraging to me, because it seems like the holdup with her for that portion of the fan base that you referred to, Scott, is that whoever takes this job is going to have, as you just talked about, important hires to make: football, men's and women's basketball, wrestling. Go down the list that you talked to. A lot of those coaches are, legendary level coaches because they've been around for so long and they're going to need to be replaced. But she seems well positioned to be able to have, that list that we hear about in athletic directors' desks of potential candidates for these new jobs. I think it's knowing who she is, at least what she says she is and what she's projecting. She's proactive. She seems to me the type of person that's already putting lists together and thinking about potential candidates when she has to replace. And that's an ongoing process, right? What it looks like today may not be what it looks like in January or next year or the year after. You continue to update that list, but I don't have any reservations at all about her being prepared and capable of doing that.
No, it's a narrow-minded thought that she's not the right person for this. And I would not have said that about Barbara Burke. I think Barbara was outstanding in her role and she retired. I would not have felt this way about her necessarily. I would have said, yeah, have her go through the process, but other people should be applying. Or, when you look at other people in kind of the number 2 roles, Gene Taylor, I would have felt exactly the same way that I did with Beth. I would have said, hire this dude, don't let him get away.
And he's proven that.
Yeah. Well, look what they did this year. When you talk about replacing a legend, as impactful as Kirk Ferentz is, he's not quite the legend that Bill Snyder was at Kansas State because they had nothing. They had no history. They were the worst program in the world, not only the country, but the world. And
they were worse than Kansas, kids.
Yes. They had 86, I think they called it. I want to say that was the year 86 or 88, the Futility Bowl, where they tied, and it was they both were 0-10-1. But they had the most losses out of any program in history of college football, to the point where there were heavy discussions about booting them from the Big 8 so they could bring in Arkansas, which would have been a smart move at that point. They should have just brought him in anyway. But he turned him around, came back for another round after they were slipping. He wanted his son to be the head coach, and Gene was not going to let that happen. And Gene was strong enough to bring in Chris Kleiman, and then they won the Big 12 title. And then their basketball team went to the Elite 8 last year. Just really a phenomenal era. And he would have been this. I would have felt exactly the same way about him as I do Beth. I would not have felt the same way about Jane Meyer. for a lot of reasons. But I think people need to kind of take a step back and think, well, why wouldn't she be good to hire a men's basketball coach or a football coach? I don't see any reason why gender has anything to do with it. I think it's just a matter of perspective. And I think, talking to some of the coaches, they seem to really like her, all the way around the board. So it remains to be seen. That doesn't mean she can't hire a stinker. Coaches do hire that all the time, or good ADs hire bad coaches from time to time. But I think she's earned the right to call the shots.
Yeah, definitely no guarantees when you're making coaching hires. A lot of it is about fit sometimes, as we've seen here in the men's basketball program. But I'm on board with what you said about her, Scott, and looking forward to seeing how she handles things this fall, basically with her on-the-job audition. Did want to mention, we're about ready to wrap this up, but Charles Heaston thankfully brought this up in the chat room. Big recruit for the Iowa women's basketball program this week. Journey Houston from Davenport, ESPN's number 19th ranked player in the country in the 2025 class, verbally committed to Iowa this week. I saw her, haven't seen her play high school yet, but I have seen her play with All Iowa Attack on the AAU circuit, and she's impressive. And I hadn't seen her probably in a year. So she was, freshman or sophomore when I saw her play, but just really well-rounded player, good athleticism, just really bright future. So the rich get richer, so to speak. And this is really the time, right, for Lisa to load up. She's got Caitlin. She's got the national spotlight, strike while the iron's hot. And they're doing that on the recruiting trail to reload.
Yeah. And that could be the difference, frankly, between the women's and the men's programs. When the men's had National Player of the Year, NBA first rounders, they haven't white struck like this. And when you have the most popular athlete in the country at the collegiate level in Caitlin Clark, now's the time to load up, as you said. And they play an exciting brand of basketball. Is it a championship level? It's close. It was close last year. But I think now is perfect time, and especially somebody in your own backyard. There's no reason not to have that. So I think that's a really big, Journey Houston's going to be a great player to have. And Iowa continues to churn them out, man. That you look over the last 10 to 15 years, Rob, and the players going back to Cash Alexander in some ways. Yeah. And, to Sam Logic, to Allie Disterhoff, and of course, Megan Gustafson and Kathleen Doyle. And, now of course, Caitlin Clark. I mean, they've had elite level, among the best, if not the best Big Ten player every era has featured it, and Journey Houston could be the next one.
I know there were probably some disappointed folks over a few hours west of here, Journey Houston from Davenport, the home area of Bill Fennelly. Yeah. And I know they went hard after her as well. I think she had offers from Michigan, DePaul, Iowa State. She had a good offer, and she's still only a junior in high school, just starting her junior year of high school. So there were certainly more offers probably down the road. And we'll talk more recruiting. There just hasn't been a lot going on, Scott. It's kind of, especially from a football perspective, we had, stuff to talk about going into last month, but, these kids start to get with their high school teams in July and start working out. And now they're in their own camps, and first week of high school football this week. They've got a lot going on. And I was up at Cedar Rapids Kennedy on Tuesday night, talked to the AD up there. And he told me they're expecting quite a few scouts Saturday night at Kingston Stadium when Dowling comes to play Kennedy. In the tackle for Kennedy.
Brooks,
from what I've heard, Nick Brooks is going to bring a lot of folks through Cedar Rapids.
Yeah.
This year to scout.
Especially, how perfect is it for him that it's, first week of the season, here, but nobody else. Very few other teams are playing. I mean, Notre Dame's playing and USC, but that's really about it on this week 0. So, they can have a lot of people taking a look at him really early, and I would expect there to be quite the crowd on Saturday night at Kingston for Kennedy. And Dowling's got some players too, so as always. And so that's going to be. Are you going to that one?
I think I'm going to try to go. I've got to I'm covering some high school volleyball earlier in the day for Prep Dig, but I may try to get out there Friday night. Kind of still tossing around. Joliet Catholic comes to City High this Friday. Kind of a neat game for anybody that's that's looking for a high school game. Hopefully the heat it cools off a little bit, and then Liberty is at West.
Yeah,
and West Liberty's at Regina. So I'm kind of looking at the potential for those 3 games on Friday night, but definitely want to think about getting out to that one on Saturday night. So good luck to all the high school athletes getting after it this week and getting back on the field. Summer went quick, but it's over now. And one more thing before we get out of here. If you're into the Cy-Hawk series, Iowa State and Iowa soccer tonight here in Iowa City. So go check that out. It's free to get in.
They moved the start time back to 8 because of the weather, and so I don't think it's that humid. It won't be that humid at that time, so maybe it'll be kind of hot, but the sun will be going down, and you'll be able to tolerate it. So that could be an okay thing. But yeah, I think that's fun, and as you said. I'm glad to see Liberty and West playing, because I know they hadn't played before. And, the first, year or 2 years of Liberty, they were still combined with West for football. And I always wondered, well, why aren't they playing? And I know last couple of years, City and Liberty played, and, last year at Kinnick. And so I was kind of hoping that West and Liberty would play at Kinnick, but, alas, they're at West High, Best High instead.
Well, we knew it was coming, Scott, but Liberty moved up. They're in 5A now, and they've been in 4A. So they'll be challenged a little bit more this year. And I was looking at my app, my weather app, and it is 10:41 a.m. Central Time on Thursday, August the 24th. It is currently 91 degrees out. Feels like 104 at 10:30 in the morning. So.
Yesterday afternoon,
computer today, right?
Yeah. And if I leave the house, it's gonna be quick. But yeah, we've reached this part of summer that's like the second week of February when it dips back below 0 and you get snow and you're just like, it's windy and you're like, God, when's this gonna end? That's kind of where we are right now with summer. It's like, come on, man, are we just gonna be able to get down into the high 70s or something and be comfortable? Hopefully soon. Maybe it's next week that we'll get there. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
hopefully the trip to Ames isn't like it was 2 years ago.
Oh, that was the worst. That was horrible. That was dreadful in every way, shape, or form. It was like 99 that day. And I remember, there's no air conditioning in the press box. So it was just, I'd put my arm down on the desk and it'd just be like soaking my notes. And it was dreadful. So hopefully this year it's, 20 degrees cooler.
Everybody's sitting up there making gravy.
Yeah.
In the press box. It was so humid on the field. It was insane, but nobody wants to hear us complain about weather. So we'll stop there. And
but they have great water. Never forget that.
That's excellent water. The best. All right, folks, that's going to wrap it up for this week's episode of the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Scott and I will be back next week. As I said, we'll maybe do our game by game previews next week, take a look at Utah State and catch up on any other news and notes that come our way between now and then. We'll have a new depth chart, plenty to talk about next week. So come back and join us then. Want to thank everybody for listening. Thank you so much to our sponsors. And please like our podcasts, subscribe on all your platforms. We have a Hawk-centric podcast every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Once the season starts, we'll have one on Saturday with the Rapid Reaction with Jovan Johnson and Jordan Canzeri. And then we have a new podcast on Sundays with former Iowa punter Brian Hurley doing a Hawkeye history podcast. So during the season, you'll get a fresh Hawkeye podcast every single day of the week. So please subscribe and like, and we appreciate that. And until next week, have a good weekend. Stay cool, and we'll talk to you soon. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.